the magical wizards out there, somehow I could not get Roman into my Skype on Streamlabs. But no worries, he's with us. Welcome to Mdaba Africa. This is Chris Wyatt here from Central Pennsylvania, talking about the regular Saturday live stream. My guest today is Roman Cabanac, and I'm going to bring him on just now, and we'll get started. My apologies for late. Welcome to everybody in the chat. I'll welcome some of you after we get started. But I don't know that Roman needs much of an introduction, but he's an attorney based in South Africa. He's got an interesting heritage. He also is the host of Morning Shot, and was the one to put together Tea with Helen, which is something I want to talk about because I was fascinated by that program. I'm very excited to see Helen Zille come back on the public stage there for a while. But we'll talk about that and about contemporary politics and issues in South Africa. And he's coming to us from Gauteng wearing what looks like a parka. So there you are. Roman, good morning. How are you?
Well, good evening, Chris, please. I know America thinks they're the center of the world, but actually we are right in the middle of the time zone. So for us, it's the evening. But thank you, Chris, for your kind invitation.
No, you're welcome. But no, it's not because we think we're in the center. It's because you start things on the left. And if you look at the map behind me, the Americas on the left of the world map. So you guys drive on the wrong side of the road. That confuses everybody.
Yeah, well, it's a colonial construct. Which way to drive on which road? I don't know. If I go to whenever I go to America, I just take an Uber. It's just much easier.
Well, that sounds like a good plan. Hey, so Roman, can you do a little bit better introduction of yourself and let people know a little bit about you? Because I have people who watch this program from all over the world, from UK, New Zealand, Nigeria, Ghana. So tell folks a little bit about yourself, okay?
All right. Well, I'm an attorney based in Johannesburg, but my passion in life is alternative media, really. So a colleague and I started a podcast 4.5 years ago called the Renegade Report, and we've had guests from all over the world, from Jordan Peterson to political leaders in South Africa to the top journalists, scientists, talking about political and current affairs, and that has been a very, very popular podcast. And since January this year, I have my own YouTube channel, which is called Morning Shot. And I do a daily news video, predominantly on South African news, and I give some analysis on the news of the day as well. So those are my 2 or 3 things that I do generally.
Roman, folks are saying that your sound is tetchy, and so is mine. But I hear you perfectly fine. Maybe you can move your microphone a little bit. I'll move mine a little bit, but that's odd. Usually people tell me something's wrong with my microphone when I can hear it perfectly fine, and most people can. So let's see if that's a little bit better.
All right. Well, I'm here. The mic is the microphone. So, yeah. Oh, there you go. So someone says your side is funny and my side's fine.
They said both. Okay, now they're saying it's better. All right.
All right. Perfect.
All right. So I got lost in the conversation. So we were talking about your background there. So, hey, listen, let me just dive into this one because this one's fascinating for me. So where did Tea with Helen come from? Because, of course, for those outside South Africa, she kind of was there and then off the scene for a bit. And then suddenly there's Tea with Helen, which was a fascinating, there was a podcast and a vlog. I watched the vlog and I found it very fascinating. Did you start this as a media thing or because you have a connection to Helen? Because you're in a different political party, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, to some degree, but I've known Helen for roughly, let's say, 2 years. She was a guest on the Renegade Report about 2-3 years ago, and we kept in touch. And then she joined the Institute of Race Relations, and I know quite a few people there. A lot of my friends work at the Institute, and when she joined, I said, well, at the time, the Institute wanted to create a lot more alternative content, like podcasts, like YouTube videos and things like that. And when she joined, I recommended that maybe Helen should start her own podcast, because she could get anyone on. She's a very prolific and famous figure in South Africa. So I said, well, Helen, if you want to be in the public eye, start your own show, start your alternative media show, and you can really put alternative media on the map in South Africa. So I think we did 6 or 7 episodes. I can't remember. It went very well. We got a lot of views, made news every week it was on. And then she joined the DA straight, like as soon as, about 2 months after she left the DA, she rejoined the DA to save it, ostensibly. So, it was a short stint, but it was a very good, let's say, practice for myself. And I think for her, it also gave her a bit of a gravitas, and it made her aware that, other areas or other avenues are possible for political messaging rather than just through mainstream media. And I see now the DA's got their own podcast, they've got their own YouTube channel that they're using on a very regular basis, much more than before. And hopefully, the lessons learned in Tea with Helen, has helped them initiate those things as well.
Absolutely. I was absolutely enthralled with it. I was watching it all the time, and then boom, it's just gone. But I saw why it was gone, of course. But yeah, no, she was fantastic on there. Where did the name come from? Was that your idea? Was it hers or somebody else's? Tea with Helen. That was brilliant.
Oh yeah, so my friend and I think we came up with the name. It was something with Helen, right? And we thought maybe coffee, and then we found out she actually hated coffee, so she said, "Why not tea?" So I said, "Cool, tea with Helen," and she said, "Yeah, that sounds great." So whenever we filmed, we needed to make sure there was a tea set, and that there was tea, and there was like proper crockery and proper proper cups, and like a real tea set, not just any old like mug, or not just any old tea. So we had to source all these things for every filming of the episode. So I had to fly down to Cape Town in the morning, set up, film, and then fly back up at night. We had an editor on board, and yeah, it was quite a rough 2 months, I remember, but very fun, very fun.
Yeah, no doubt. It was quite with the interesting program. It was a shame to see it go, but of course, it obviously makes sense why it can't go. But like you said, the DA now has things like the Corona Cast. I think that's very interesting that they're doing in the midst of the Wuhan coronavirus COVID-19. Am I the only person left on the planet still calling it the Wuhan coronavirus? I think I might be.
Well, I think Donald Trump was called racist for saying the Wuhan flu or the Kung flu. I can't remember what it's called. For now, in South Africa, yeah, it's still called COVID, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, it was Trump. They went after Trump for calling it Wuhan, or they called him a xenophobe for banning travel from China too. And then, of course, they famously said that he was too slow to react, even though he did it a month before the rest of the world did. So you just can't win if you're Donald Trump, and I guess he doesn't really try to. He wins. He wins where it matters in policy and execution. That's the big difference there.
Well, I mean, let's quickly
Yeah.
execution. How
Yes.
is that going? Because I mean, some of his policies for me are a little bit wacky. They're not Americans. I mean, maybe they make
Yeah.
sense in America, but in terms of execution, he's a big fan of the executive order. Is that legitimate execution? Because the executive order is not really a democratic thing now, is it? It's basically giving the president a lot of power to do certain things, right?
Actually, no. Executive order should only apply to the executive branch. That's the only part of the country that the president has legal authority over when it comes to something like that. So technically, an executive order only applies to those in the executive branch, which would be all of the bureaucracy, the military, the FBI, the Justice Department, all those things. So, for instance, the President Reagan signed executive order back in the early 1980s about security clearances for access to classified information, E-triple-E 2, so I can't remember. Anyway, but that executive order still exists to this day, and it still affects. If an executive order is signed by a president, it continues until a future president rescinds it, revokes it, or writes one that overrides it. Now, when you say he's a fan of the executive order, they all are. Trust me. Every president has tried to expand that role. But
Yeah.
if anything, Trump has actually used it far less than his predecessor, who used it to legislate from the executive office. For instance, DACA, this delayed referrals program, so that people who come who are illegal, but their parents are illegal, they come into the country, they get in here illegally, and they bring their children with them who are foreign nationals. And when they grow up, they can't get legal status. And so normally they should be deported. But Barack Obama, with a stroke of a pen, created essentially legislation, which is not his purview or his legal right under the Constitution, and got away with it. And this week, the Supreme Court overturned a Trump executive order which rescinded DACA, saying that he didn't justify why he rescinded an executive order. Well, that's not the role of the Supreme Court. That was a 5-4 decision. The role of the Supreme Court is to determine whether it's legal under the Constitution. And it's not legal for the Supreme Court to tell the president that he can't write an executive order that rescinds previous executive orders. Executive orders aren't laws. And that executive order exceeds the writ of the president of the United States, which is what Barack Obama did.
Right. But how do you determine what is legislation and what is the ambit of the executive order? Because I remember when Trump came when he became president, and within 2 weeks, like he left like NAFTA, he left like all these other things. He did so many things as soon as he became president, and I was like, geez, he's actually like going ahead. And I don't know whether those were executive orders or not, but what is the purview of the executive order compared to legislation, and how binding can an executive order be, or is there quite a limited scope to make one, so to speak.
Well, there's supposed to be a limited scope, and the decision by the Supreme Court this week kind of overturns that concept. It basically saying that what Barack Obama did was a law, and that the future presidents must justify rescinding a law, which is not even possible. But first off, we need to get something straight, Roman. And since you're in media, you'll appreciate this with the media company. Most of what you just said is simply untrue. It's fake news. He didn't leave NAFTA. We never left NAFTA. We're still in NAFTA. What we did is what he said, we should leave NAFTA, but we have a treaty obligation. It's a treaty. So the president can't leave a treaty. Now, he can get with Congress to suspend a treaty, but what happens with legislation is a bill comes in. Let's say I've got an idea. I want to ban all leftists. I think that's a good bill, actually, but I want to ban all leftists. And so I'm in Congress, and I introduce a bill. It goes to committee. It gets written up. It goes in the House, or the Senate can start it. And then it runs through, and there's a vote on the floor. Then it gets approved there. It goes to the other body. Usually it goes from the House to Senate, but sometimes it's reversed. It goes to the Senate, which is the senior body, and then they review it. It goes through committee. They mark it up. They usually make changes, so it has to go back and forth. Eventually, the legislature produces a bill. They send the bill to the president. The president reviews it. He has 30 days to sign it. If he doesn't sign it, it's an automatic veto after 30 days. If he signs it in those 30 days, it becomes law, and that is the law of the land. We do that with our budget every year. Our budget is actually a matter of law, and that's why we've not had budgets for most of the last 20 years. It's been continuing resolutions, embarrassingly. I was in Liberia, and I remember that our ambassador and our government was castigating Liberia because they were 30 days late with their national budget. Now, remember, this is a country coming out of civil war, right? And most of their assistance are getting it from us. They were giving them a hard time because they were 30 days late with their budget. I'm like, we haven't had a budget since 1998 or 2000. We've been operating, it's just an authorization to keep going with previous levels with like 10% more spending. But so that's how a law becomes a law. And what the executive branch can do is sign something that applies to the executive branch. But of course, Obama, and I'm not just picking Obama, but Obama, because these are recent examples, Obama used the executive order to frustrate international commerce. So the tar sands project in Alberta, in Western Canada, which is highly carbon intensive. And so the leftists and greenies don't want that to happen. What happened is that he used executive order directing the State Department to do certain things, which delayed actually having the Keystone XL pipeline. And then he also used it to keep the Department of Commerce from allowing interstate commerce in exceeding his legal rights. But he did that and got away with it for 7 years. So the Keystone XL pipeline was delayed for almost 10 years as a consequence of Barack Obama's unlawful intrusion into it. And he can get away with it from Canada because it's an international border. And he's responsible for national security and foreign relations. So that was actually legitimate, telling the State Department to review it. But the State Department, after 2 years, recommended that the pipeline go ahead. It was a fantastic idea. I mean, I'm summarizing, but that's what they said. But Barack Obama just ignored it. And he got away with it. Now the Keystone XL pipeline is under construction, courtesy of Donald Trump writing executive order, which rescinded Barack Obama's executive order.
Geez, yeah, it's quite convoluted and complicated.
No,
looking from the outside.
You're the one that wants federalism, man.
Yeah. No, don't get me wrong. Well, in South Africa, yes, it would be great for South Africa if we had that sort of that sort of political what do you call it, makeup, so to speak. But for South African trying to really understand what Donald Trump's actually doing and what he has done is actually quite difficult. Like I just said, fake news about NAFTA, but I mean, if you just read what people say in South Africa, for example, I haven't seen a single and believe me, I've looked a single news article or opinion piece on Donald Trump that is not even moderately approved or that shows moderate approval of Donald Trump. Every single mainstream media piece of Donald Trump is purely negative all the way through. I haven't seen one person say Donald Trump, you know what, he's maybe not that bad, let alone good, right? So it's actually very difficult to find out what exactly he has done and what he is doing. That's why you just follow him on Twitter, and that's why it's so great that he's able to do that. Except now Twitter wants to fact check all these tweets.
Yeah, it's funny because Twitter doesn't fact check the Chinese Communist Party. It doesn't fact check Alyssa Milano or what's that? I can't think of her name there. But anyway, it doesn't fact check any of these leftists. They just seem to fact check James Woods And now Katie Hopkins has been banned. I guess they really have a thing out for her permanently. But yeah, fact-checking Trump on his opinion, that's just absolutely comical. He wasn't offering any evidence. He was offering an opinion. You can't fact-check an opinion because it's ridiculous.
Well, don't ISIS still have some accounts up there? I mean,
Yeah.
even the Ayatollah of Iran has, like, the Jews need to be like mowed down and used as fertilizer, or
And
well,
that's-
maybe not that, but close to that, and he's not ever fact checked or banned.
No, and
which
that's
is pure
actually on
hate
Twitter.
speech.
No, you're right. There's lots of
Yeah.
hate speech on there, but hate speech is okay as long as it's on the left. So Tertia says that she tolerates my fondness for Trump. Listen, Tertia, that's coming across wrong. I'm not fond of Trump. I'm fond of execution, success, and policies, and that's what's happened. We had Barack Obama come here and lie about capitalism for 8 years, blame capitalism for the mess we were in, when actually it was government intrusion into the marketplace, unwarranted intrusion, that caused the problems we had with the meltdown in the subprime mortgage market, and all that came after that, and General Motors and all those other things. The state is responsible for that in large measure. There was some responsibility in the private sector, but largely it was a state-influenced outcome. So my fondness for Trump, I'm fondness of results. And the guy came in after Barack Obama lying to Americans and saying capitalism is to blame and that we'll never see 3% GDP growth. The guy comes in, rescinds a bunch of unnecessary executive orders, which was overreach, which let business be in business, and suddenly we're at 3.6% GDP. We have record employment in this country. Workplace participation is at record levels in this country. Poverty is reduced. Wealth disparity is holding steady despite the fact that the titans in tech are amassing massive amounts of wealth. We still don't see wider wealth disparity. So when you say I'm fond of Trump, I'm not fond of him like Roman is and like Jerem is. They seem to be very happy with Trump. I will call Trump out on his shortcomings, like, where the hell is my wall? I'm still waiting for a wall. It's not done. I voted for the guy. I want a wall, and it's not there. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let me just clarify. It's not that I like Trump as much as I dislike politicians generally. And he's a breath of fresh air. Even if I would disagree with him on policy, I'd still defend him, if that makes sense. Just because of sheer character. He's just a sheer, like, forceful character. And he's like to be blunt, he's like the, Nicolas Maduro of the right? And Maduro is like a real character, a bastard of note, and I hope he gets drone striked quite soon. But you can't deny what these people are. Like, they are just characters of the world. And Trump, thankfully, I align myself with his worldview much more than Nicolas Maduro, of course. But it's very good for, if I may say, the right wing to start fighting the culture war. And Trump is really an expression of that. It's a cultural war, not a political battle, or not a battle about policy. It's a battle about what matters in the country at a deeper aspect than just policy.
No, I agree with you, Ramon. And the thing about Donald Trump, and I think this is important, is that people need to not really pay attention to what he says. He trolls people. He intentionally starts fights. He's a bully. And I don't hold that against him. Politics is a blood sport, and people need to realize that. Maybe that's why I haven't run for office. It's a blood sport. But the thing about Trump is you can't go with what he says. You have to go with what happens. So, and look what the press does. They lie about things incessantly. Oh, my God, we're going to go to nuclear war with Korea. Oh, the sky is falling. What they didn't bother to report is that North Koreans committed acts of aggression, acts of war, not aggression, acts of war against Japan. They fired intercontinental ballistic missiles over Japanese airspace. That's an act of war, testing their missiles. That's not allowed under international norms. And we didn't go to war. Donald Trump, stroked little Kim's ego. Rocket Man called him names, and the media fell for it. He met with them, and North Korea hasn't attacked anybody. Yes, I know they blew up a meeting house on the border recently, but that was something entirely different. But the point is that you have to go with what the guy does, not what he says. He said that NATO members need to pull their weight or we're leaving NATO. Of course we're not leaving NATO. That was hyperbole. And what happened? Almost every NATO country now is close to the minimum amount they're supposed to contribute from their gross domestic product to pay for defense. It's embarrassing. Less than 0.9% of Germany's GDP was spent on defense. And now Angela Merkel has the temerity, the audacity to whine about us pulling some troops out of Germany. How about you pull up your bootstraps and start defending your own damn country? We've been there for 75 years covering your backside. Anyway, and that's what Trump does. He got people to contribute. And now most of the countries, other than just Estonia, are actually contributing to it.
Yeah, yeah. And what do you make of sorry, is this an interview of me, or are we just having a conversation?
Well, it
Sorry,
was it was
I don't know if you have
it
questions.
was supposed to be an interview of you, but I mean, this program is set up to be a conversation as well. So you've got interesting things to talk about here beyond just the
Right.
obvious. So
All right. I mean, please feel free to interrupt me and ask me whatever questions you have. But this notion of nationalism in America. So there's always been an element of nationalism in America for a very long time. You know, people are proud to be Americans. You know, it's the greatest country in the world. We've got the best constitution, and I tend to agree with most of those things. Right? Why is it such a huge deal when someone like Donald Trump stands up on a stage and says, "Yes, I'm a nationalist"? Like, why is that a big deal in America? Or was it at the time? Because I remember he had the speech and people freaked out. But it's the normal people that normally freak out. So I don't know if it was a massive deal just generally amongst the American population. Like, does it matter much? Because I think you are a nation of nationalists, no?
well, it's interesting because people keep saying the sound is going, but I'm hearing the sound perfectly fine. Roman, you can hear, right?
I can hear you. Just need a pop filter, if I'm honest, Chris.
Well, that's because I'm screaming into the microphone because people keep saying they can't hear me. When I sit back in a proper distance with a microphone like that, where it's supposed to be, then I don't need the pop filter because I usually keep it to the side. But anyway, so let me try that and see what happens. Yeah. I have a pop filter, but I took it off because it was just distracting people that kept talking about the pop filter, and I didn't really need it because it was on the side. Anyway, yeah, so nationalism. Here's the thing. It's perfectly fine in this country when people talk about black nationalism. That's never been an issue. But suddenly, when Trump comes off, it's nationalism is a bad thing. And of course, you have the cacophony of media, The Economist, The Guardian, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, which suddenly have no problem with nationalism in the Czech Republic, in Slovakia, in Slovenia, in South Africa. They have no problem when people are nationalist and proud of their country. But when Trump comes up, because he's a convenient target. See, the problem with the left is this, Ramon. I think it comes down to this. They took him as a joke. When he came down that escalator and said, "I'm running for president," they just thought that was hilarious. And they thought they were going to have fun with the Republican primary field because there were 18 candidates, and they decided to have a lot of fun with it. So they gave him all this free press. Listen, every time that Donald Trump opened his mouth during the campaign, the Republican primary season, he was on TV on every single channel for like hours on end. The guy get up and talk for 2.5 hours, and they wouldn't take commercial breaks. They created this monster. They created this beast. And they have buyer's remorse. And so when Trump actually got the nomination, like, oh my crap, he could actually win. They had buyer's remorse, and that's what happened. So being a nationalist, there's nothing wrong with being proud of your country. But the problem is that people turn it into a race, ethnicity, or religion thing. And nationalism is about the nation state. That's what it's about, from my perspective. It's only become an issue of late, and it's often tied to things like, white supremacy and other nonsense like that, which is utter bull. That's nonsense. That's not the truth. You can be a nationalist. I know people who are black Americans who are nationalists, proud of America, take pride in its history, have served in uniform, and they are nationalists. So it's distorted by people who have objectives and agendas.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think especially, I think since Trump is a what we call a civic nationalist, right? He's not a racial nationalist or an ethno-nationalist. He's like an American nationalist, and that means, the Constitution and everyone who lives within it, who abides by the Constitution. I don't see what's wrong with that.
No, I'm with you, and it's absolutely the case. The thing about being an American, Roman, is it's different than being a Czech or a Georgian or a Russian. Being an American is an idea. It's a concept, it's a belief. Anybody, you can come here, Roman, as long as you adopt our values and mores and norms and take an oath and become naturalized. You become an American. We don't care that you've got ancestors from Morocco and from France, even though we don't like the French.
Nothing wrong with being French. We civilize the world. Well, in terms of cooking, that is.
Oh, that's quite true, actually. So Elizabeth says, what? Let me see. Says, what USA government constitution would Roman like to see? I think what Elizabeth is asking, what sort of government would you like to see in South Africa? I think you'd like a system of federalism, unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah, very much. Geez, sorry, Chris. People are saying there's a massive echo from me, but I'm perfectly fine. I can hear everything perfectly fine. I haven't changed any settings whatsoever.
I'll turn down your mic a little bit on Streamlabs and see if that's better. Okay. All right. You still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I can hear myself fine.
We'll see if that makes a difference for people.
So Malcolm says your stereo mix is not correct. All right.
Everybody's a studio producer today. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Indeed. Well, I mean, to be fair, what we need in South Africa is much more local power, to be honest. In terms of we need grassroots power. We need people to self-actualize at a local level in South Africa, and that means federalization in terms of making provinces a lot more independent from the national government, and even within provinces to have municipal zones, so to speak. Like you have counties, right? Like that sort of system in South Africa could work very, very well. And I think it's absolutely necessary because what we've had for over a century in South Africa since 1910 is sort of this a racial nationalism. Yet white nationalism, and now you got black nationalism, and it's just not tenuous because South Africans are not nationalists along racial lines. We are nationalists along value lines, so to speak. But we all have different values. We don't agree on those sort of values, right? So my notion of justice is very different to the Zulu King's notion of justice. And I'm not saying mine is better or his is better, right? They just are different. So we need to self-actualize people or communities, to a much larger degree, to enable them to self-actualize, give them the freedom to do so. Because under a national government with, black nationalism now, it's just not working, and it hasn't worked under white nationalism either.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So some of the comments coming here, people talking about the federal system. Yeah, a lot of people get confused about the U.S. and then why doesn't Trump just take over Seattle and stuff like that? They don't really understand our system. I see that Clever Coffee has come in and said hello, coffee snobs. I think I'm the only coffee snob here. Roman is a big coffee fan. I mean, his show is called Morning Shot. He's got a cup of coffee there right now, don't you?
I absolutely do, right? Yeah, unfortunately, it's instant, but it will do for now.
Ooh, sacrilege, sacrilege. So, so there's a question here from Carrie. It says, Roman, what do you think about the lefties trying to prevent FW de Klerk from speaking in the U.S. about racism? I didn't hear about that. What's she talking about? Do you know?
I actually don't know either. I mean, maybe FW is coming to the US to do a campaign. I know FW was interesting man, old FW, one of the most conservative National Party members who just understood, the at points of crisis you just have to go with the majority. Sorry about that. My dogs are fighting. And I think I wonder what FW de Klerk is feeling now after seeing what South Africa has become under the ANC, because let's be honest, the NP were taken for idiots by the ANC. The ANC negotiated masterfully under Kodesa, and they've got all the power now. And I wonder how FW actually feels.
No, I think it's a good question, and I think actually I agree with that. The MP was hoodwinked, or allowed themselves to be hoodwinked. And in fact, many of the problems South Africa has today come directly out of CODESA. The system is very undemocratic. The ability of the national government to simply create massive municipalities, thereby eliminating mayorships and town councils so that minority parties, opposition parties can never get a foothold. And more importantly, what's lost in this people don't get is that when you suddenly have the Johannesburg metropolitan area, which includes all these former small towns where had mayors and town councils, now you have opposition parties that can't get elected because they're in this big swarm of all these other people where they're outnumbered massively instead of being in a small town. They get no political experience. So when they do get into power, then they're not ready for it. Like the movement for democratic change in Zimbabwe. Once they got into power with the government, they didn't know what they were doing, and they cock it all up. So it's very undemocratic. The system in South Africa, in my view, from the outside, is that party matters, nation comes second. The country and the people come after the party. And you see this time and again with the ANC, but you also see it in the DA as well. I mean, party discipline is paramount. Am I wrong?
What do you mean? In what way with the DA? With ANC, I do agree. But what examples do you want to tell me about the DA, though?
Well, you have to be very careful in the DA about speaking out about something you agree with if it doesn't agree with the party's platform. That's in my view. If I'm now a member of the Republican Party here, I can say what I want, and that doesn't get me sanctioned by the Republican Party. But you have seen DA members disciplined for their tweets, DA members disciplined for YouTube things, and to me, it just seems like that's out of bounds. But maybe I just have a different view on it. But certainly to me, South Africa, the party is more important. I mean, it's ludicrous, Roman. I mean, the president of South Africa resigned because he was no longer president of the African National Congress. And that's because the people didn't vote for the president. Parliament votes for the president. That's a parliamentary system. That's not a real republic in the sense that we're talking about here. So I'm not picking on the DA. I'm just making the point. It seems to me that party is more important than the people.
Well, I think isn't there a problem with most political parties around the world, Chris? Maybe. I know that the DA had that sort of problem where they wanted like a code of conduct about how people should act while they're members of the DA, and they had this whole thing about if you're a racist, don't come to the DA and things like that. And at the end of the day, it seems like those sort of things were more publicity stunts than something real. Though I've noticed recently, since the last election last year, there's very few things in terms of discipline. Because I mean, Helen Zille tweeted again, and people were outraged, and nothing happened to her
Yeah.
now. So I think it was just when you try to discipline your own people for expressing freedom of speech, I think it's a lack of confidence, and I think that was the DA under the previous leader, whereas the interim leader now, John Steenhuisen, seems to have is a bit more, actually, a lot more democratic, to be honest. And I think he's quite willing to, he's more willing to roll with the punches of being in politics. Politics is necessarily a bit messy, but you need to sort of also let people self-actualize within your party. Because how do you learn anything if you just muzzle people that don't follow the party line? And what exactly is the party line anyway, right? So, but yes, I think political parties do think of themselves a lot more important than the people within them, but especially their voters. I think there's a huge, huge disregard for what voters actually want at the end of the day from political parties all over the world, to be honest, not just here.
No, absolutely, I agree with you. And that is, in fact, I think the problem here in the States is the political parties are not paying attention to what voters want and what voters care about. The Republican Party is famous for that, and they lost the plot a long time ago, which has caused a lot of problems and led to the Tea Party movement a few years back. But folks, you're listening to Indaba Africa. This is Chris from Central Pennsylvania. My guest on the Saturday live stream is Ramon Cabanac, who is the host of Morning Shot, a South Africa-based morning news program, and also runs a media company and is an attorney in South Africa. And I think was a founding member of the ZACP, which is not the South African Communist Party, in case you're confused. That's the South African Capitalist Party. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that, Ramon. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, listen, let's bring our minds back to about a year before the May 2019 national elections, right? I know a lot of people who do polling. I know a lot of people who are good and analysts, and we were like, okay, so there's a Ramaphoria thing coming along, right? Ramaphoria is loved by everyone, and the DA already in for a hiding. So we thought, well, what alternatives are there? There's like the Freedom Front Plus, which I sort of agree and like, but I think they're very ineffective. And Cope, too small, they're not really known for much. IFP, also not really known for much. What we need is a real party that actually has its principles in its name. So the Capitalist Party. So we actually wanted SACP, which is the South African Capitalist Party, but we found out that the communists actually have trademarked their own name. So the Communist Party made their name, their property, enforceable under law, which is ironic, of course. So the international code for South Africa is ZA, so it's fine, ZACP. And it was very simple, 10 principles and 10 policies. And unfortunately, it took 3 months to register with the IEC, which is the Independent Electoral Commission. And by the time we actually were a political party, the election was 7 weeks away. And we had roughly, I would say, at the time, about $20,000 to play with in terms of campaign financing. And we spent it all. And we made a lot of noise on social media. And we executed our strategy quite well, if I'm honest with you. But at the end of the day, we got about 16,000 votes for a 7-week campaign with $20,000. We beat out a lot of parties that were in parliament before, but we were nowhere close. We needed double that just to get one seat in parliament. So it was a lot of problems with funding. We knew a few billionaires who refused to fund us, and also timing. It just took far too long for the IEC to actually register us as a political party. So, or maybe the message wasn't that great. Maybe that also happened.
So there is an interesting question here. I don't know if I'm tread into it because we didn't talk ahead of time. Someone asked the question, are there Are the rumors that John Steenhuisen offered you a position in the DA? Is there any merit to that, or do you want to talk about it or skip over that?
I have never been offered any position in any political party ever.
All right, good.
That I can promise. Cross my heart, hope to die. Never. Parties don't want me. I'm too radical.
Well, you definitely speak your mind. That's one thing I want to talk about. When I first tuned in when you started doing your show, and I started tuning in, it's a devil may care attitude sometimes, which is really refreshing. You know, when people come on and they want to be politically correct, you're like, no, I'm not going to buy that. I mean, those are my words, not yours, but that's the impression that comes across.
Well, I think truth matters, right? I'm a terrible liar, firstly. When I lie, I go bright red and people know that I'm lying. So I just prefer not to be embarrassed in front of my audience. So when I speak the truth, or what I understand to be the truth for myself, I can speak it well, so to speak. But if I lie, or I try to create a brand, or I try to be someone I'm not, I just I just emanate discomfort, and people can tell that it's fake. Like, I'm not a good liar, so it's no use lying. So I just tell people what I really think, and it makes my job a lot easier.
So let me shift the conversation a little bit towards Morning Shot, because I found it quite interesting. I really enjoy it. I like that. I know you've explained it in your channel, but again, we've actually got a good audience here today. Almost 170 people currently watching. Appreciate that, folks, for tuning in to listen to Indaba Africa with Roman Cabanac and myself, Chris Wyatt. Yeah, but a Morning Shot. So when I first saw it, I'm like, oh, this is nice. Nice little clip here, about 10 minutes or so, a rundown of the news with some analysis, which is something I was doing on prepared videos myself, but I just started out. So I looked at yours and like, this is pretty good. So what was the motivation for Morning Shot? Where did the concept come from? And had you thought about other times of the day, or just the morning seemed like a good time because you're having a cup of coffee and it was just a clever marketing thing? So where did all that come from?
Well, I mean, I've always been interested in doing content and doing YouTube shows. I've been on Ronaldo's show a few times, and it was interesting to see, people actually tuning in. Like, now we have 165 people watching us having this conversation, but it feels like an intimate conversation between you and I. If we were on a stage and there were 165 people, like in a hall or a conference center, I would need brown pants, right? Because I'm terrible at public speaking. Or I was, maybe I think I still am. But anyway, so I just looked at what Renegade Report was able to do, and without blowing my own horn, I think we sort of fundamentally changed the way that people think about media. So once Renegade Report started, within the first 2 years, there was an abundance of new things on YouTube, new podcasts, new Facebook pages, new publications from a libertarian perspective, right-wing perspective, center-right perspective. Hell, there's a lot of things on the hard left as well, though they tend to be funded by other people. And all these things are not funded. These are just people who are passionate about ideas, who want to, tell the world about them. So I saw that, and I thought, what's really missing in South Africa is looking at the news, but with a bit of analysis. So if you read any opinion column in South Africa, for the most part, 90% of them, it's just vacuous nonsense. It really is. It's just vacuous. It's, the president's trying really hard, but, the people in his party are holding him back. And, the ANC policies are so good, but they're just terrible at implementing them. And all that is just crap. It's just pure nonsense. So I wanted to, so a friend of mine who sort of made me start this was like, what we need is like a daily video on 2 or 3 news items and with analysis. And you're the perfect guy to say it. And I was like, well, and he told me this a year ago. And I always said, well, I'm not good at speaking on a mic. I don't know how anything works. And he just said, you know what, just do it. Just do it. And so I read a book called Atomic Habits in December. And it's about building habits. And it's a phenomenal book. I recommend everyone reads it. And just through that, I was like, well, you know what? The goal doesn't matter. It's the system that matters the most. And the system must be, there's a video every single weekday, under 10 minutes, but now it's more like under 12. And I must just be honest with my analysis on the news of the day. And that's where it started. And to date, I haven't missed a video. I've done about 220 videos so far this year alone. And so far so good. And it's been proven to be much more popular than I expected. I expected 5,000 subs by the end of this year, but I'm sitting on almost 13 now after about 5 months. And yeah, my only problem is I wish I started much sooner.
Well, actually, one of the things I like about it, I assume that you realize this, but one of the things I really like is it's consistent. I know that every weekday at 7 a.m. South African time, that which means I got to be up at 1 o'clock if I want to catch it when it's live. That your video is going to be on there. It's going to cover news of the day. So I think that's one of the nice features of it is people can count on it. Unlike I guess death, taxes, and morning shot are the three things we can count on right now.
Well, but I think that's the nub of the YouTube platform. You have to create content. So I see you create content. So you have like a video about analysis or something like that in Africa, which is good. A lot of people try come onto YouTube, and then they just have like a live stream, like once a week with a guest or whatever. But there's no real like branding of that channel. Like people don't understand what it is, and I think YouTube works well if you have prepared content at a particular time, and then you can and then the live stream. So I have a video in the morning, which is the morning shot. It's under 10 minutes mostly. It takes a while to do, 3 or 4 hours a day, but it's there. It's very important for me to understand what's going on in the news myself, and for people to understand my perspective if they're interested. And then in the afternoons at about 5 p.m. I have what I call the wind down, WHINE. So you wind down the day, and it's just a catch up with the audience, because what I found is people really, really, really love speaking to the people that they follow, right? So instead of sending a tweet or sending an email, you have your live stream with your audience without a plan, without themes, and you just talk to them. And then I found that sort of system has worked really well for YouTube in terms of getting new subscribers, and also making people feel like they're part of a community. And I think for me, the Morning Shot community on YouTube has been like absolutely brilliant. I've learned so much from my audience, and hopefully they learned a bit from me as well. And we're building this little network of people who have skills, who have values, and they're sharing them on YouTube, and they're sharing them on a Telegram group I set up. And yeah, so we're building actually a community, funny enough, from a news and analysis show that I never expected.
No, I agree with you. That's absolutely fantastic. Now, the wine is a relatively recent, that live stream. You just started that not too long ago. Is that correct?
Yeah, so during the lockdown, I had what's called Lockdown Diary, where I interview people about the essence of the lockdown and the mindset around that. And then I did live streams whenever I felt like it, but I thought, let me just do it at a particular time every day. So it's also 7 a.m. morning shot, 5 p.m. wind down. So also it becomes it becomes a routine as well. The important part is for your channel to become a part of a routine.
No, there's a lot of really nice complimentary things on here for you, Ramon. People saying some good things about you. They love your analysis. They really enjoy your channel. They're happy to be part of the community. Lots of really good things on here. Before we got started, you were kind of asking me that question about my channel. Did you want to ask me that? And then I'll answer it now, because you and I started a conversation and almost didn't get the show started. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at you, Chris. I mean, you got decades of experience in the U.S. Army. Well, sorry, I don't know. There's different aspects of that, but I mean, you're a retired colonel. You know a lot about Africa. So my question to you was, what are you doing playing around with some random person from South Africa who does a little YouTube show when you have done far more interesting things with your life, right? Like why start YouTube for yourself, and especially as an American commenting on matters within Africa? I I don't know what the audience is for that sort of thing, but obviously there is one. I mean, you reach 4,000 subs within what, 2 months or something close to that. So obviously there's an audience. But what are your ambitions for your channel?
Well, that's a great question, and it would take me a couple minutes to answer it. That's why we didn't do it beforehand. But let me do a little bit of housekeeping before I answer it. So, thank you, Nigel Mercer, who became a member, or excuse me, did you become subscribe to the channel? Excuse me, and Herman Roos, who became a member of the site. Herman is the tobacco farmer from Gauteng area, who was a guest on my program. He was he on your program, Ramon?
He was indeed. Well, he was on Renegade Report,
Oh, Renegade Report, okay.
and I might actually meet him in person very, very soon. But I'll keep that off air for now.
Okay, and Herman also has his own channel now, Farmer Travels, which is kind of an interesting take. He's got some nice graphics and talks about Asia. I was his first guest on there. It was an interesting program. All right, so let me answer your question now. Okay, so here's the deal. social media is something I couldn't spend a lot of time on as a serving officer, particularly because I was an intelligence officer and you just can't be out there doing a lot of things. And so I stayed off, even though I have accounts, I'm kind of an early adopter of everything. I'm like Inspector Gadget. I'm on everything. I was on Twitter, even though I didn't use it like 3 weeks after it came online. Everything like that. Anyway, so I didn't do much on social media. I don't have a great disdain for Twitter and for Facebook in particular. But I've had a YouTube channel since 2006, but just one video was on there. It was a waterfalls from my trip to Iceland. So I had 4,300 views for a video that I forgot that I had on YouTube. Anyway, so what I did do is, since I was at the U.S. Army War College, my last tour as the Director of African Studies, I was in an academic position, even though I was still serving, and had a lot more latitude. And so I started focusing more on my LinkedIn presence and started posting articles with analysis on there, and suddenly found out that people were interested and it was very popular. And then in November of 2017, when the military overthrew the government in Zimbabwe, within 15 hours of the coup starting, I published an article, which people don't really read articles on LinkedIn, which is interesting, but I published an article on LinkedIn within 15 hours of it starting, saying this is a coup, this is what's going to happen, this is why it's happening, and this will be the impact of it. And I pretty much called it right. Whereas most analysts and political commentators waited a week before they were willing to say it was a coup, because nobody wanted to admit that there was a coup in Southern Africa, because we just don't have coups in Southern Africa. Anyway, so I saw how powerful that could be, because suddenly thousands of people were coming and asking to be linked with me on LinkedIn. And so I realized that I could use this to build a brand for when I retired. And the idea being that I could use my skills to become a consultant or get into politics or do something that changes the world. I mean, I've been very fortunate, Roman. I've rebuilt an entire military, not single-handedly, that people work for me, but I designed the plan, but rebuilt the military in Liberia, designed the entire military intelligence infrastructure for Botswana. I wrote a report that meant that 640,000 Africans didn't starve to death because action that George Bush took as a consequence of my report. So I've done some pretty amazing things that I've been a part of. And I'm not boasting, I'm just saying that, as you said, it's a very consequential thing. So why would I be doing YouTube? Well, the deal with YouTube is that this was always going to be a side gig that was going to be something where I could post if I gave a speech somewhere, or if I presented something or taught, I could have that there so people could also take a look at it and learn a little about my brand and about what I had to offer. And that's what the idea was. So I retired from active service on October 1st. I was still in Japan for the Rugby World Cup, which the Springboks won. Yay. This is 2015, not 2019, but I got a 2019 one. Anyway, so what happens is that I retire, I come back, I start looking around at what there is out there for work perhaps, and maybe sit back and relax a little bit, catch my breath. And then I noticed that, I started doing the strategic consultancy. I got things going. I got a few gigs booked, several actually for April and May. And then I said, maybe I should take a look at my YouTube thing and start doing some stuff. So in mid-February, I started making a few videos on subjects. I took a subject to try to keep it under 10 minutes or 20 if it was an in-depth subject, and give analysis on different things that were taking place in Africa. And the idea was geostrategic issues around the world, but also a focus on Africa and the U.S. in particular. So ultimately, my goal with this, though, to be honest, and one of the reasons why I do so many speaking engagements is that, from my perspective, Roman, if the United States doesn't get fully engaged in Africa from a business standpoint today, we will be a second-rate global economic power in the year 2050. The reason for that is because between now and 2050, there will go from 1.3 billion to 2.3 to 2.5 billion Africans. No matter what we do with family planning, that's going to happen. That's baked in just based on the people who are out there. So you're going to have a consumer class that's likely to be 900 million to 1.3 billion people with disposable income across Africa. The United States, that's 4 times our current size. And if we're not engaged in Africa and we don't have the ties and connections now, it's going to be too late in 2050. You can't wait till 2030, you can't wait 2040. So a lot of what I'm trying to do is to get North American business, US and Canada, involved in Africa to get a foothold. Because of apartheid and sanctions, most American businesses left Africa when they left South Africa in the 1980s, late 1980s. Very few have come back. The exceptions are Boeing, Microsoft, places like that, Google. They're there. But most small, medium-sized enterprise US don't look to Africa as a marketplace. And so that's really what it was. Now, that's a long thing, but let me just, one more thing here, Roman. But what happened is that once I started the channel, the lockdown got serious. It started in South Africa. I started doing videos, and I saw that people were desperate, and I was very concerned about people's mental health. This is honest. I was concerned about mental health, and I talk about that in my videos and on my live streams about the callous attitude of the ANC and the National Coronavirus Command Council at just shutting people down, locking them in, and taking away their cigarettes, taking away their alcohol, locking them up with people that they don't usually spend 24 hours a day with. This is going to cause gender-based violence, incest, which nobody's talking about, mental health issues. So it seemed to me that I have the bandwidth, I have the time, I had the experience. Why not do a talk show? I saw Ronaldo. He did his lockdown show, and I said I could do something to give it a view from the outside. And so the stray voltage aspect of my channel was really just a public service. It really wasn't meant to be anything other than that. And that's where a lot of subscribers have come from. But most of my subscribers actually have been coming from some of the videos I've done. And so I still do this. So I've got three aspects of the channel: the stray voltage live stream, the prepared videos, in-depth analysis. Like this morning, I did one on Tendai Biti being arrested in Zimbabwe and talking about the clown car show that is Zimbabwe, and then one on the elections in Malawi on the 23rd of June. So I did those two prepared videos. Stray voltage, live stream. Last night, Joe Amelia and I got a little crazy with a Weizen, and if you heard about that, maybe you did. But anyway, and then the third piece of that is a regular Saturday show. So yeah, there's building a brand. The brand is Chris Wyatt Africa, for lack of a better term. But the Indaba Africa is my consultancy, and this was meant to support it. Super long answer, but hopefully that makes sense to folks. Does that make sense to you, Ramon?
No, it does make sense, but it is interesting that the notion of bringing commerce into Africa, especially North American commerce, right? So American commerce, and I think the Chinese they bring commerce into Africa, but in a very parasitic sense. Of course, like they need money, and they bring in Chinese laborers to build things, and when the country can't repay it, the Chinese expropriate it, which is a way of doing business, right? And not the best way to do business by any means. What is preventing the Americans and the Canadians from actually taking Africa seriously? Because that annoys me greatly about South Africa. We have 1 billion more people to the north of us who need toasters, kettles, 2-minute noodles, sandals, blankets, mosquito nets, whatever you want. We manufacture zero. Nothing. We have 1 billion customers north of us, and we do zero. And that's based on the ideology of the ANC. That's based on a variety of factors, right? But I noticed, and you point out, Americans not doing it either, right? The Chinese are doing everything. So maybe the Chinese are like way ahead of everyone else, as it appears to be. What is preventing the Americans from thinking that Africa is actually, quite a good place to invest money and to create markets for the products you make? Because I think it is that obvious, but apparently not as obvious as one would suspect.
No, it's not as obvious as people should think. So John Jarvis became a subscriber a short while ago, and someone else just did. I missed that. Apologies for that. Who just became a subscriber? Thank you for that. Yeah, it should be obvious. It should be a no-brainer. This is the biggest no-brainer since sliced bread, I think. Africa is the next El Dorado. That's what I said last year in my speech at the Trade with Africa Summit in August in Chicago. And absolutely, it drives me insane. Now, it's not just China. People miss this. Turkey is deeply involved in Africa, particularly in Ethiopia and East Africa. And in that area, almost all the commercial products you find, like juices, apple juice, grape juice, and consumer products in the grocery stores, comes from Turkey. So the Turks are deeply involved in Africa. So it's not just the Chinese, but the Chinese are definitely there. The thing is that I think the real issue here is ignorance. Most people in North America look to Africa and they have an image that's unrealistic. First off, as I tell people all the time, one of the problems with South Africa from a U.S. perspective is that most Western liberals and most people in the West look at South Africa through a lens of April 27th, 1994, the Rainbow Nation, Kumbaya, it's all wonderful, apartheid's over, we're all going to love each other, reconciliation. And they've got stuck in a time warp, and that's how they see South Africa, not for the capricious governance that's taking place, the totalitarian behavior of the ANC, the racialization of every aspect of life by the ruling political party, and many other things. They don't see that. And by the same token, it's similar in Africa. What most Westerners and North Americans see for Africa is 54 countries with confusing customs and the 3 C's, which I call it, C cubed: chaos, corruption, and coup d'etat. That's what they see in Africa. Now, that is a narrative that was still true in many aspects 20 years ago, a bit true 15 years ago. But that's not the case in Africa today. Yes, there are coups. We had Central African Republic, look at Mali collapsing. But there are just as many and more success stories of countries that have moved towards democracy and even market-based capitalism and tremendous marketplaces. Listen, Nigeria has a lot of corruption, but Nigeria is also an amazing business opportunity for those who want to get into Nigeria. You can do legitimate business there. And there's other places around the continent. So I think it stems from a position of ignorance and a lack of creativity to think about what can be done and where the markets are. And I really think that folks outside China and Turkey and a few other small players beyond that are missing the boat. And look at South Africa. This is the great tragedy. Excuse me, Roman. When apartheid ended, South Africa could do business in Africa. So this was a golden opportunity for the best capitalized, the most experienced, and the safest airline in Africa, South African Airways, to expand its wings across Africa. But what do we have today? We have the state-owned, Jackal that's looking for another 26 billion rand to reduce itself by half its size, to have only 20 planes and only fly to a certain number of locations. I mean, we have regional airlines in the United States that put that to shame. So it's just, in Europe, you have regional airlines. It's really sad. You did see some South African business. You see ShopRite in Uganda and in Kenya. You see Standard Bank all over Africa. MTN is the largest mobile provider in Nigeria, despite the Nigerians having issues with MTN. But beyond that, why isn't South Africa making the nappies that people use in the Congo? Why isn't South Africa making the binkies that kids are sucking on in Senegal? Why isn't South Africa making the food that people are eating in Burundi? Because of ANC policies and a lack of imagination. So.
Yeah, no, very true. And a basket case of a country 25 years ago called Ethiopia has the best airline in the entire continent right now. That is profitable. They have 10% growth. Okay, yes, from a lower base, fine. But Ethiopia is a more democratic, functioning capitalist state than South Africa. And it's a lower base. Yes, there's other things at hand, true. But if you have the political will, this sort of stuff can happen. I mean, 20 years ago, there were live aid concerts to feed Ethiopian children, right, who were starving to death in the Darfur. Now, Ethiopia, the prime minister wins the Nobel Peace Prize, right? The prime minister wants 10% growth. The Ethiopian airlines are profitable despite being state-owned. With political will, it's possible. But with anyway. Yeah,
no, but you're
ideology
onto
is a real
something.
problem in Africa.
No, you're absolutely onto something, Roman. So talk the Ethiopia example. So Ethiopian Airlines, in fact, is the best airline in all of Africa, and they spread their wings everywhere. They've expanded. They've got the biggest network in Africa, but they're not alone. Brussels Airlines is spread all over. Of course, that came from the carcass of two bankrupt airlines, but it's done very well as Brussels Airlines, as has Turkish Airlines. They're all over West Africa now and spreading around. But with Ethiopian, it's a state-owned enterprise, but the difference is that it's allowed to operate as a private entity. It belongs to the government. They're the major stakeholder, but they don't interfere in the business. If only the ANC could not interfere with patronage and disruption of the business model of their state-owned enterprises, they might have a chance. But yeah, I think that's right. But you're saying ideology. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and the ideology of the ANC we know is the National Democratic Revolution. There's a very strong social streak throughout, but it's also excuse me. Another big problem is that there's a huge amount of short-term thinking. There's no long-term strategy. It's about we fought the struggle, we must eat now. And the eating now stuff is what's destroying the country. Kagame, or whatever his faults are, and I'm not a fan of the man, has a more longer-term strategy. I don't know what will happen to that country after he dies, if anything at all. But you can see the long-term strategy at hand here. You sort of try to build these institutions, you try to build these markets, and okay, with the Chinese, unfortunately, in some aspects, but in South Africa, there's not even a strategy for tomorrow. It's all about how much money can we take in through what means to fund these things that fund us, and there's nothing long term here whatsoever. Whereas in other parts of Africa, Ethiopia to some degree, maybe Kenya to some degree as well, there's a sort of a long term strategy at hand here. And especially with the Belt and Road Initiative, those strategies become even more reliable and even more worthwhile pursuing.
No, absolutely. I think what it comes down to is what you're talking about here is a lack of leadership. So I was asked about what will Donald Trump be remembered for? And the first thing that I told people in that conversation was, well, for starters, the vision to create Space Force. It's something that's needed, and people made a joke about it. They laugh about it. They like to make fun of Trump. But his vision is similar to Kennedy's vision, looking at putting a man on the moon within a decade. We accomplished that. That was leadership. That's looking long term. And that's what's always bothered me, Roman, my experiences in Africa, working even with American diplomats, is that oftentimes countries we deal with and our own diplomats, they're focused on the here and now, the next year, this budget, or 2 years, that budget. And virtually everything I was focused on, of course, we're executing things in the short term. But when I was helping design programs in Africa for security cooperation with other countries, I was looking at today, tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So for instance, when we redesigned the intelligence infrastructure for the Botswana Defense Force, I didn't want to commit my commander to doing this long term, so I came up with a plan that would allow him to do it while he was commander and not leave it to the next guy, so it could be canceled or be a burden on the next guy, but also so that Botswana could pick up the baton and run the program without our assistance, and we could just provide guidance and consultation in the future. And that's what we did, with the objective of them running their own program, training their own people, developing their own skills, and looking at developing, for instance, intelligence officers from inception as a lieutenant or as a young sergeant to work up the ranks and have positions where they can advance in experience and responsibility. So it's been this, everything I've worked on Africa, that's my focus. I'm focused on five. That's why I'm talking about 2050 today. I'm talking about 2050 because it matters now. You have to set the stage. You have to set the conditions for success tomorrow, today. And very few leaders around the world do that. They talk it, they say about it. The Chinese actually do a pretty good job of it in some respects. Not entirely. They get a lot of credit for stuff they don't do, but they actually do have a strategic vision. And we claim to have a strategic vision, but the reality in America is it's only as long as the next election. And that's really sad. And I think in South Africa, it's only as long as the next thing you can pilfer from the state.
Unfortunately so. And the repercussions and the trade-offs of that sort of thinking, excuse me, is devastating. So to appease the unions, you will fundamentally destroy public education. It's the intellectual genocide of South African children for 20 years, right? Which means that there is no real long-term future based on the gig economy or the fourth industrial revolution or whatever other nonsense they want to, whatever other nonsense they talk about. And also, when you fundamentally want to sustain power solely for your own self and for your own patronage network, you inevitably have to destroy the institutions of democracy. And once you destroy the institutions of democracy, not that there was very strong ones here in the first place, but once that happens, you just become another, and I apologize for this, but as Donald Trump said, you become another shithole country where the future's not set, investors are not interested, and the population just becomes dependent on you, and the more dependent they become, the more power you have at the end of the day. And then you have the Chinese giving you a few $1 billion a year to give them whatever assets they want, and you basically destroy the lifeblood, the psychology, the history. You destroy everything at hand for short-term gains, and that's where South Africa is going at the moment, I'm afraid.
That's quite sad realization, actually. Really, really sad. We're an hour in, so let me do a little bit of housekeeping here, Roman. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Indaba Africa. This is Chris Wyatt. Thank you for tuning in. An excellent audience today. Some really great questions, some great comments. A few questions. We've gotten a few of those, but I want to recognize a couple things very quickly because that's something you should do when people are so devoted to your channel. First off, I missed the super chat, but Christoph Havanga just gave a super. What's those things called? A sticker, super sticker for 14 Rand. Thank you for that. And then 2 people have signed up to be members of the channel since the program started. That's Herman Roos and John Jarvis. So thank both of you very much. I thank you both for doing that. And I thank my guest, Roman Cabanac from Morning Shot, who's with us today. I think maybe Roman thought I was going to do an interview, and maybe I thought it became more of a conversation. And I think it's actually been more productive and interesting. So I've asked a few questions from an interview standpoint, but we are talking politics about South Africa, but a lot of things that he's saying about South Africa are very much applicable to the current political situation here in the United States, which I think is fascinating. So yeah, let's see what we've got here. People talk about ESCOM. Oh gosh, don't get started with that. Let's see what else. Yeah, so Roman, so Morning Shot. So you have like a media company now, an actually company that you're because you've got Renegade Reports. Is that the company?
So Renegade Media is a company, but that just applies to Renegade Report. But there's like hardly any money there, so to speak. There's no company for Morning Shot yet. It's still in my personal capacity, but I might one day I will incorporate long term. But I think especially in let's just do it this way. Donald Trump, whether you like him or not, is the consequence of culture. And culture is changed through media. It's very simple as that. And I think in South Africa, we don't have a media that looks at news that way. Now, I'm not talking about propaganda. I'm just talking about what sort of analysis do you want people to understand? And that analysis creates a culture or creates a movement, and that movement inevitably, you know, pulvers itself into the political field, and then politicians and people who have influence and commentators then take on that culture for themselves. And then sooner or later, you have Donald Trump in the White House, right? And no one saw that coming, let alone me. Let alone me. But Fox News started what, 1992? Breitbart started 2011. And since then, there's been a whole lot of other right-wing Daily Wire and very well-funded cultural, political influence from these sort of publications, these sort of alternative media. And Rush Limbaugh obviously has been around for 30 years or 40 years, whatever it is. In South Africa, we need to do that somehow. And I'm a small cog in the machine, but if you look at me through Daily Friend, through the Renegade Report, through myself, through Jim Warfare to some degree, some elements of the report as well. It's like the sort of different culture of private property, personal responsibility, center, pragmatic right, so to speak. That needs to become mainstream. And once it becomes mainstream, politics picks up that culture and then you go with it. So that's in essence what I'm trying to do. And I think this is the first time I actually said that in public. But that's one element of it. You have to normalize ideas in society, and you do that through media, essentially.
Well, I guess that's kind of an exclusive here on Chris White Africa. You disclose that. Well, that's kind of cool.
I mean, but seriously, Chris, 10 years ago, right? Okay, maybe you're different. If 10 years ago someone told me that in the year 2020, the biggest political question of our time will be immigration, would you have believed them? I would have said no. Immigration has been settled long ago. Look at all these economic, arguments for immigrants. They're wonderful. They pay more taxes. They don't They don't take welfare. Like all the usual things about immigration 10 years ago was what I believed. I believed, yeah, open borders, let people come in. It's fine. It's fine. And then Trump comes out and says, no, build a wall. Illegal immigration is a terrible thing. And we saw the fight that was. But I had no idea 10 years ago that immigration would be a number one issue for the world in the year 2020.
Well,
because I was reading the wrong things. Not reading the wrong things, but because the culture of the time did not think it was a big thing. But it was a real fundamental thing.
Well, you make a good point, and I think it's a valid one. But from my perspective, I think it comes down to worldview. So my entire adult life, illegal immigration has been a serious issue in the United States. Also, the fact that I'm very well steeped in our civics and our history and our political science, I've understood the role of immigration from that standpoint. So, we have over 1 million people who become naturalized citizens in this country every year. Hands down, far more than any country in the world. Yet, Donald Trump is painted as a xenophobe and a racist, even though the numbers are almost identical to what they were during the Obama administration. But the point is so for me, immigration has always been an issue because when I was a young man in Europe, illegal immigration into Europe was a huge issue. We had this happening in Europe before Schengen. After Schengen, it became much worse, and it fell off the world's radar screen. But it didn't fall off mine. And from a South Africa standpoint, I've always paid attention to it because I've watched Zambia for decades have xenophobia against the Chinese in the Copper Belt. And so it's been an issue on my mind for about 25 years with Zambia. In South Africa's case, it's always been an issue because I was aware of the fact that South Africa's always had immigrants because of the massive demand for labor in the mines. So Lesotho, Mozambique, Botswana, less so, but Swaziland, all those countries contributed in Zimbabwe, lots of migrant labor into South Africa. And so, in fact, today you have at least 5 million black Africans who are living in South Africa who aren't South Africans, and many of them illegally, at least 5 million. You have 2.5 million at a minimum Zimbabweans living there, some legal, many not. So for me, it's always been an issue, but I didn't see it I didn't think it was going to be a global issue. Now that sounds funny because I'm talking about South Africa and I'm talking about Europe and I'm talking about America. But immigration is an issue in Australia. It's an issue in New Zealand. It's an issue in Vietnam. Surprisingly, in Vietnam, it's an issue in Singapore, Malaysia. So it is a global issue now, absolutely. And it's being distorted, I think, for political purposes about what the role of immigration is. But that's just my viewpoint on it. But yeah, I get your point though. There's a lot of things. I would never, in my wildest dreams, thought today would we be arguing about social justice and police brutality and the way this is being distorted and what's actually happening around the world. Those are the things that kind of caught me by surprise, particularly after the Obama administration when we saw this with Freddie Gray, Ferguson, and Trayvon Martin and all that stuff. Every one of those cases was proven to be nonsense and bogus in every respect. But I thought this had been something that we had dealt with as a society, but we haven't. And now the whole world is jumping on the bandwagon, virtue signaling, all these white people in New Zealand taking knees. Come on, grow up. That's ridiculous. Your treatment of the Maori is the real issue here. You want to talk about racism in New Zealand? Be talking about George Floyd. Let's talk about the Maori in New Zealand. That's a real issue. I've been to New Zealand, and it remains an issue. So that's the kind of stuff that surprised me, Roman, that we're still dealing with this stuff. That people still, well, it doesn't surprise me. It's human nature. But it's sad that people still look at people and, brown, white, blue, green, Muslim, Christian, the other. And that's what disturbs me. And I'd hope that we wouldn't be dealing with that in 2020. That was my hope.
Well, I think there's a few issues at hand here. Number one, I think there is something wrong with policing in America. As someone who doesn't live there, so I may be completely wrong, right? But hasn't there been quite a heavy militarization of the police? And aren't the police quite well defended? Isn't there like a special qualified immunity for police officers who shoot other people? Or am I doing fake news again, Chris? I can see you shaking your head there.
Okay, let me. Two issues. No, but that's fair, Roman. Look, you're an erudite. You're an intelligent, well-educated man who has common sense. But these are narratives that are being pushed. So let me address both those. So qualified immunity. Of course, there's qualified immunity. I have qualified immunity as a military member. If I'm in combat, I'm not going to be tried because I shot someone unless I did it unlawfully. They don't have qualified immunity against unlawful actions. That's not what qualified immunity is. It's exactly that, qualified immunity. So basically, citizens can't file civil lawsuits against law enforcement officers on a trivial basis. There actually has to be some merit to it. And that's what the qualified immunity gives them. But that's now being portrayed in the press as if they're allowed to do whatever they want. That's utter nonsense. We have plenty of police that are in jail for drug violations, for abuse, for spousal abuse, for rape, assault, murder. When I say plenty, we're not, we're talking about there's a few million cops in this country, but we're talking a few thousands of people. But it does happen. So qualified immunity is a very specific thing. Politicians have qualified immunity. Nancy Pelosi can get up there and lie and say whatever she wants. Like, for instance, a few months ago, this is one reason why I did a video, is Nancy Pelosi got up and said that Donald Trump just banned 350 million people from coming to America. It's an utter lie. Provable, demonstrably provable. She put it on her website. I did a screen capture. It's actually a press release lying about it. What Donald Trump did is because Nigeria, Kazakhstan, and a handful of other countries refused to comply with international standards for passport issuance, with the biometrics and with the proving the provenance of the person who had the passport. Because they refused to do that after 12 years of being asked and cajoled to do it, Trump said enough. We're not going to let people migrate to America from Nigeria who come with a Nigerian passport that does not meet international standards because we don't know who that person is. You haven't verified who they are. That affects 21,000 or 13,000 people from Nigeria. So I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but it's only a few thousand people from Nigeria. Total, it was like 31,000 from around the world, not 350 million people. We didn't ban travel from Nigeria. The 200 million Nigerians, if they can get a visa based on the merit of coming to the United States like they could the day before, they could still do it. And they still come to America. Well, not now because of the lockdown, but they were still coming to America. So she is protected. She can tell those lies because she serves in Congress, and there's no consequences to it. She can tell that lie. Now, a private citizen can be charged with libel and slander for misleading people and doing something like that. So that's what qualified immunity is about. Militarization of the police. Okay. So there's a lot of surplus military equipment that police departments were asking for. Now, I heard lies on the radio yesterday, people saying that the military gave this. No, military didn't give anything to police departments. The federal government disposed of this material, not the military. And the federal government oftentimes granted it to states, counties, and municipalities that requested it. The militarization. Well, here's the problem. And if those of you in South Africa have seen cash and transit heists, should the police be armed with nightsticks when the robbers have AK-47s and crew-serve weapons and armored vehicles? No, that's ludicrous. So we've always had SWAT teams around the country, small units of special weapons and tactics, who are trained in sniper operations, hostage rescue, all these different things. And they've always had armored vehicles and sniper rifles and things like that, night vision devices. Now, more police departments have that in rural areas and some of the smaller cities as a consequence of material that was excess being made available to them rather than being demilitarized. But the militarization is a misnomer. Because they have military equipment doesn't mean they're militarized. It's their conduct. Now, if their conduct is militarized, okay, fair. But it's not like the police forces run around in armored vehicles and roll up in people's neighborhoods. I haven't seen a single law enforcement official on the East Coast in an armored vehicle or with a crew serve weapon. Every cop from whether it's Park Service, police, county sheriff, state troopers, all have sidearms, and they wear uniforms, and they drive unmarked cars to give speeding tickets and marked cars to show a presence. So both of those, I think, are wildly overblown, and this comes from a guy that spent 36 years in uniform. I've driven tanks and been shot at. So the militarization to me is just out of context. There are hundreds of millions of interactions between police and citizens on the street every day. I saw this the other day on the Nelson Mandela Foundation's lie on their website that over 1,000 black Americans are killed by the police every year. That's utter nonsense. Demonstrably can be proven wrong. Less than 1,000 Americans die as a consequence of interaction with police, which is a difficult statistic to get, by the way, because the states and counties have to report it. The government can't compel them. Anyway, but less than 1,000. 282 black Americans died in 2019 as a result of interactions with law enforcement. Over 400 white Americans. Where is this war on black Americans? If it's a war, it's like Trump. He's the least effective racist on the planet. He reduced black unemployment. He's reached out to black churches, yada, yada, yada. So if Trump's a racist, he's very ineffective. And if there's police suppression of black, now people are going to come back and say, you don't know what it's like to be pulled over just because you're driving, because you're black, this, that, and the other. Okay, calm down. Anyway, so that's both of those points. That's why I was shaking my head, Roman. Demonstrably exaggerated and embellished by the press. There is merit to the fact that they have this equipment, and qualified immunity does protect the police to some degree. But police who commit crimes go to jail. Now, there's a question: do police departments cover this up? That's a legitimate question. Maybe you need an ombudsman in some places, but just simply stating, you're not stating this, but simply stating that qualified immunity means that the cops aren't held to account is nonsense.
Right. All right. Is there any sort of claim made by protesters, and now based on George Floyd or based on the other Black Lives Matters scenarios, are there any claims that are worth merit to your mind?
Okay, well, let's take George Floyd. There's absolutely merit to that, to what's going on with George Floyd, his situation. What happened to him should never have happened. No one should die in police custody like that. And I don't understand why a police officer has his knee on the guy's neck and for 8 minutes. That's insane. Clearly something's wrong there. But here's the thing. The officer involved was arrested. He was charged with second-degree murder that was upgraded to first. I don't know, but it was current charge. But he was arrested within a couple of days because he tried to hide. They went and arrested him, they locked him up. They denied him bail. He's in prison. He's incarcerated. He's charged. He will be prosecuted. What do we want? Do you want the police fixed? Well, that's a responsibility of the city of Minneapolis. That's who they work for. That's who controls those police. They're responsible for their conduct. And the state of Minnesota by extension. The federal government has very little influence over that. So there is merit to some of these things. Like, for instance, there was a correlation in Florida. Florida has this stupid law. I hope they've rescinded it now, where a law enforcement officer can pull you over and they can ask to see how much money you have. Or, they can check your property if they have a reasonable suspicion to search it. This is tied to drug laws because people smuggling drugs and transporting drugs in Florida. So the cops can pull you over, state trooper, and he thinks that maybe you have drugs in the car. He can do a search. Now, I think that's pretty flimsy because we have a constitution that's supposed to protect you against unlawful search and seizure, but they get away with it in Florida.
Yep.
And if they find money, they can confiscate the money on the suspicion that it's tied to drugs. No evidence whatsoever. And these confiscatory laws that are taking place around the country, asset seizure laws, this is shameful. It has happened to a number of black Americans who are transiting through Florida, coming north and south, going there. It's happened many times. I don't know recently, but this is over a decade ago, and there's demonstrable evidence of it. Women especially who were targeted for this, and they clean them out. They get $3,000 in their wallet. Why do you have $3,000? It must be drug related, and take their money. Well, the person was moving from one place to another, and this was their money for rent. Yeah. Anyway, so I
think it's called asset forfeiture laws, right?
Yeah, asset forfeiture laws. Yeah. So there are real things, but those real things apply to everyone. Listen, I lived in a housing project as a kid. 400 families, 3 of them were white. I was thrown to the ground when I was like 6 years old, pinned by an older black kid who pulled out a switchblade, and all his thug friends were there, and he put it across my throat and threatened to kill me because I was white. Okay? Are black people evil? No. That guy was a jerk. Actually, my best friend was his brother, and he threw his brother to the ground. He put a switchblade to his throat. But the point is that people get discriminated against unfairly all the time. That doesn't mean it's institutionalized. That just means some people are asses, whether they're in government or not. If they're in government, then it's our job to make sure that they're not doing it, because government's role is not to abuse people, but to make an environment that everyone can prosper in. So I don't know if I answered your question, Ramon.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. What is curious to me is these sort of things only happen in Western countries. Whereas go to an objectively racist place, China,
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia,
Well, they love
most of the
Africa. They love Africans in China.
as slaves, perhaps. But Russia, also extremely quite not racist. I don't know if you want to use the word racist, but these are people who are not inclusive. Let's just use that term rather. And there's very few, what do you call it, protests there. Right, there's very few things that make the news there, whereas the Chinese now are, imprisoning millions of Uyghurs based on religion,
Yep.
based on religion. But there's very few. So, what is it about like the Western psyche or the Western civilization that makes these sort of protests applicable there? And I think it's two or three things. Number one, freedom of speech and association is very, very important to the West. And number two, and that's two. But number three, in the Western psyche, there's an element of doubt that creeps in, right? Because how can I explain? Doubt is inherent within Western culture. Are we doing what we are doing correctly? Like, oh, is this correct? Is this right? Can it be better? Can it be better or not? Or can it be worse? What can we do? And I think that is quite easy to sabotage and easy to weaponize, where you basically can just tell people for over generations or over decades, in this case, that whatever you believe is actually a pathology, right? If you think your black neighbor is your friend because you have him over for a barbecue every week, that's actually not true. You're actually still racist. You're actually just using him as a tool, right? And I think that sort of gaslighting, as they call it, can actually mess with people's minds, and they sort of tend to believe these things that are not true at all. Objectively, in South Africa, it's not a racist country. I've traveled this country numerous times. I know people all over it from all different colors, all different races, all different religions. No one cares about race. Not once have I been stopped to say, you white, therefore we hate you, or anything like that, right? By an ordinary member of the public, by a politician, yeah, all the time, right? All the time. By a policeman, yeah, once or twice. But in South Africa, ordinary South African, race is not a big issue at all. In the intelligentsia, it's a massive issue. In politics, it's the massive issue. But they try to undermine what you can anecdotally tell through empirical evidence. And I think maybe that's also a feature of US society as well, that what you actually believe is false, and we're going to create these edifices that are not true, but that are very, very powerful and weaponized. I don't know
Well,
that if I'm making sense there.
no, it made sense to me, and I think it's important to make a couple distinctions here. It's, not for you, but for the benefit of everyone. It's something I've been pointing out for a couple of decades, and that is in my country, people, and not just my country, but it's other places. People default to calling everything racism when oftentimes it's bigotry, and that's an important distinction. Bigotry is a learned behavior that's easy to unlearn. Well, not easy, it's easier. But racism, people who are racist actually believe that one group is better than another. That's kind of hard to unlearn that. That's inculcated or taught, and it's hardwired into a lot of people. It's not impossible. I mean, the neo-Nazis that are in prison and those on the other side of the aisle, they're not going to change that worldview anytime soon. But lots of things that people say they're just bigotry, and they're from ignorance, I mean, and what I like to say is, I don't know if many people listening in the audience know this, but when I was younger, we had this show in the States called All in the Family with Carol O'Connor, Archie Bunker. He was famous. It was a sitcom back in the 70s and early 80s. And Archie Bunker was a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male, and he was like the biggest bigot ever. Absolutely, he didn't like anybody unless you're white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male. He didn't even like his wife. He called her a dingbat. I mean, he loved his wife, but he called her a dingbat. His daughter married a Polak, so he called him a Polak all the time instead of a Pole. And his neighbor was George Jefferson. Of course, the Jeffersons came from that. It was a spinoff of that show. And he was a bigot against everybody until he got to know people. And then suddenly all the things he thought he knew about them were wrong, the stereotypes and the misperceptions. And I think a lot of what happens in the world is people say and do things because of bigotry, ignorance, or because someone told them it was that way. And that's not really what they believe. When I grew up in Maryland, everybody used the N-word. I didn't, but everybody used it, black and white. Black people said the N-word, white people said the N-word, and like these N's and those N's. And sometimes it was malicious, but most of the time it was just laziness because that's what people grew up and they heard. And it wasn't right. And now we've outgrown that for the most part, and people fail to recognize that. But real racism exists. and anybody is capable of racism. And that's what disturbs me so much. I keep hearing this whole discussion. I saw Derek Jeter, the famous baseball player here in America. The guy had a $350 million contract to play baseball. That's insane. And he owns the Florida Marlins now. He went on and did a video, and he talked about we need to end racial hatred. And I agree, everything's great. But then all came around, and he started talking about white people. Like, excuse me, no, all people. Not just white people, all people. And if you can't make that distinction that anybody can be a bigot and anybody can be a racist, then perhaps maybe you're a little bigoted and maybe you're a little racist. And I think that's an important distinction which a lot of people really miss.
Yeah. No, it's just excuse me. Yeah, it's just interesting to me about why these sort of things tend to happen in areas that are, on the evidence, the least racist areas in the world.
Well, it's, listen, I'm with you, Roman. I've been to South Africa, I don't know, about 450 times, I think, roughly. And that's not much of an embellishment. That's pretty close to the accurate number. And I've actually met racists in South Africa, only a handful. Almost every South African I've ever met, no matter whether they're Tswana or they're Zulu or they're Xhosa or they're colored, they're Afrikaans, English speaking, they're not racist. Some people are bigots because they don't know better, and it's not malicious, I've seen. But most people are well intentioned. They want to get along with their neighbors. They have no objections to anyone else. They don't. So it is disturbing to see the racialization and everything, and to see it here in the States, to hear this systemic racism. No, we had systemic racism, and we've eliminated that. People are taking the thinnest of threads and calling it racism when anytime somebody feels marginalized, they turn to racism. And it's really sad, actually, I think.
No, it is really sad. It is really sad. And Chris, sorry, I don't want to rush us, but I've got another about 5 minutes or so.
Yeah. I was going to say, we're going to cut off at 9 minutes. We're about 5 minutes away. Yeah. So I don't, other than my microphone apparently not pleasing a number of people and you having feedback occasionally, maybe I'll just go buy a new microphone. This $100 microphone seems to be bothering people, but anyway, so Roman, thanks for being the guest today. Any closing thoughts about the things we talked about, or anything you'd like to share with folks, maybe about Morning Shot or Renegade Report before we take off?
No, not really. I want to talk about this notion of the president of South Africa. He says this very often. He's like, why South Africans, please, let's build an inclusive economy. Because if you don't, we'll take it away from you and expropriate it. And I was thinking about this notion for a while, because I listened to a man called Hotep Jesus. Now, Hoteps are a strand of black nationalists in America. But they have an element of Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey throughout, where they say, listen, white people just generally, if you don't like us, that's fine. Like, we don't want you to help us in any way. We just want you to be left alone to build our businesses and to build our institutions that will protect us from you, or protect us from predation, or protect us from whatever the case might be. But it's not a question of hate. It's about trying to build our own internal political, social, and economic system for ourselves. Because we've seen what happened in the past, and it's very similar to what the Jews did, or what the Jews have been doing for 5,000 years, right? They've been screwed over so many times by so many different people. They're like, listen, we can't rely on anyone other than ourselves. We need to build our own infrastructure, our own ecosystem within economic and political and social, so that we can sort of just transplant that wherever we need to go, right? And now they got Israel, so it's a bit easier. But the Hoteps have this notion as well. And I thought to myself, it would be so nice to have that sort of black nationalism that is entrenched in capitalism. That we don't have in South Africa. But it would be so nice to have one here. Because in terms of politics, all we have is victimhood culture. Whites have been here for 400 years and raped and genocided us, which is not true. Alternatively, it's about, well, the whites built everything, so give us a little piece of it. And if you don't, we'll take it away from you through expropriation. It's about also, and both of those dehumanizes black South Africans to a degree where I think Hendrik Verwoerd would be very, very proud. Right? If he was alive today, he would say exactly the same sort of thing. But because a black government says it, it's we don't think about it that way. But I mean, what are your thoughts about this notion, generally speaking, about in America or even here, about this notion of allowing black people, especially in Africa, since we're here, the space and the ability to self-actualize through whatever institution they want to build, without having to pander to people who might not care about them, or without needing to threaten people who built institutions of their own, that they need to be inclusive institutions. Basically, what do you think about inclusivity generally? Because I think it's a bullshit concept. Fundamentally, the most inclusive system in the world is a free one, the market.
Yeah.
Because I don't care who makes my shoes. It could be a Zimbabwean pensioner, or it could be a Vietnamese woman, or it could be an Australian whatever Aborigine. I just want a pair of shoes. Like, I don't care who makes them. So what is your view on this notion of inclusivity and integration at all costs?
Okay.
And it's happening in America and in South Africa.
Oh, absolutely. It's happening to a far, I don't want to say worse degree, but it's certainly happened to a very serious degree here for a long time now. So there's two words that I find ironic, and both of them are used to destroy things and to pretend that it's actually achieving what it does. And also, they're used to be, well, look at us. And that's inclusivity and diversity. They're bull. They're utter nonsense. Who cares if you're diverse? If you're broken? If it doesn't work? Lots of countries around the world are very diverse. Lots of governments are very diverse. It doesn't mean anything. Diversity of thought is true diversity. That's the diversity that matters, not diversity of physical appearance. We're all Homo sapiens. And if the ANC, I remember, crowing about 10 years ago, look, we have 42% of our parliamentarians are women. Yeah, and 10% of them are competent. The rest were picked because they're compliant or they're sleeping with someone. That's right, I said it. Yeah, they're not picked because of their political acumen or their experience. I mean, those who actually can do something are limited. So diversity means nothing when it's fake diversity, and that's what most diversity is. We see corporations all over the world, America particularly, ooh, look at us, half our board is female. Okay, so what? What does that mean? Okay, that's not true diversity. True diversity is diversity of thought. And inclusivity in the same vein. So Robert Baden-Powell would be spinning in his grave today if he knew that there was no such thing as the Boy Scouts of America anymore. It's the Scouts. Why? Because female groups sued and said that they were discriminatory. Well, they were welcome to be discriminatory. They had a charter. They were a private institution, and they can be discriminatory. When the government says that you have to let people in because you have to, that's wrong. That's not the purpose of the Constitution. The purpose of the Constitution is to limit government against us. And if people want to associate freely, whether they're black, for instance, at universities in this country, black fraternities don't make a habit of inviting white students to become members of their fraternity, whereas white fraternities have no objections to black, Hispanics, and Asians becoming part of their fraternity. But the black fraternities and sororities seek to be exclusive. And that's okay. I don't have a problem with that. But don't clamor to say that other groups can't do the same thing. That's the problem with inclusivity. Inclusivity is only valid when it's everyone else can be separate except for white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Then they're somehow racist when they want to be that. If you're going to do it for one group, then do it for all groups. Otherwise, it's a fake term. It's a fake nonsense. And that's what we see. Diversity really drives me nuts. So let me real quickly. In the Army, almost every single time that we pick a equal opportunity NCO, you want to guess what that equal opportunity NCO is? I'll give you a guess. Take a stab at it.
A black female.
Usually a black soldier, and oftentimes a female. That's correct. But almost always a black. Why isn't a white or Hispanic soldier or Asian soldier the equal opportunity? Do they not know what equal opportunity is? Can they not complete the same training and have the same empathy and do the job effectively? Of course they can. But it's about appearances, not about outcomes. And that's kind of like the ANC's government. It's not about outcomes. It's about appearances. Well, it is about outcomes, how much you can steal, I guess.
Yeah, because I think that I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any means. I think the fact that there's a black entertainment TV in America is fantastic. Over here we got like black churches, and that's fine. But I think by trying to force integration, you're trying to create this very vacuous gray blob of people that doesn't really stand for everything. It's a culmination of various ideas like smashed together under coercion, and it just leaves everyone feeling less of a person. In essence, no. I mean, why would anyone want to be a corporate lackey?
Exactly.
If you're a proud Zulu, because all corporatism does is strip you of your identity completely. They must wear a shirt, and you must say yes or no, sir, and you must must drive a BMW. Like who wants that willingly?
Well,
No one. Right?
listen. The whole reason I fell in love with South Africa, Roman, is because it's so diverse and interesting. I mean, true diversity, not just appearances, but diversity of thought, diversity of ideas, and also actual physical diversity too. Both the environment, you've got Mediterranean climates, you've got the high veld, you've got tropical in KZN, you've got massive mountains in Drakensberg. It's got something for everybody. You've got deserts in the Karoo and the Northern Cape. But people-wise, you got all these different peoples, all these different languages, different religions, different cultural history, different political history. It's all fascinating. Why would we want to make everybody the same? And that's what's going on here in America now. These corporate cowards are rolling over. Today, Eskimo Pie announced that they will no longer be called Eskimo Pie. That's a little ice cream. It has a little chocolate bar with white ice cream inside. I guess that's racist and it's unfair. Eskimo is a slur. No, it's not. It's an alternative term for Inuit people. And Inuit's not even the correct term for all of those people. So it's like, are we going to repaint all the Indian motorcycles, the fantastically well-built motorcycles in the 1930s, and call them something else? Because it's Aunt Jemima's gone now. So Sal, I come out with the Viking syrup. I'm going to have maple syrup that has Vikings on the cover. But of course I can't do that because that will be racist because I'm only targeting white people. It's utter nonsense. This is what's going on in the world, and these cowards are destroying culture, making everybody gray, turning us all into androgynous little drones, and people should stop it. Be proud of your culture. When Brandy, who's a black girl, portrays Cinderella, that's not cultural appropriation. That's Brandy playing Cinderella. When a white woman puts cornrows in her hair, that's not cultural appropriation. That's what the Neanderthals and what whites in Europe did for 40,000 years. So she's perfectly okay at doing that. Anyway, it's just utter nonsense. And we're past your hour and 30 minutes, so I don't know if I could go forever. We're having a good time here. But one last final thought there, Roman. Because you asked me a question.
All right, no, I actually did. Sorry, I did want to. I do actually need to go. My wife's actually sending me messages, and that's a bad time. Rather than just shouting. No, but I think that's the essence of what I want to be. I think it's also this notion in South Africa and now in America as well. It's about allowing like these people into like your space.
Yeah.
And that ideology is one that I can't stand at all, because I don't expect the Zulu Kingdom to allow me into their space, except as an observer. But I fully understand if they don't want to treat me as one of their own. And I think if we allow that for everyone, the world is actually much more interesting. But by forcing people to integrate and by forcing people to not be themselves, you just destroy humanity completely. And I think understanding your roots is vitally important, and that's where I stand with real black nationalists and nationalists of all kind in this regard. But it's about allowing everyone equally to understand their roots and apply them to the world. Basically, that's it.
Absolutely. Well, Roman, thank you very much. I'm gonna let you go. I appreciate you being on the stream today. It was really good. This is a fantastic turnout today. I think it was a great Saturday session, so thanks for that. Folks, you can catch Roman at Morning Shot. I don't have a link in the video. I'll put that in after the fact. I apologize for not doing it ahead of time. But you should check out Morning Shot. It's a fantastic program. And maybe even check out his wine live streams. Those are also lots of fun. He's always chilled and relaxed. Earlier, for some found this is an appealing thing. They mentioned Roman's sexy voice. That was when they were talking about the microphone. So I thought I should point that out.
I do. Thank you. It's actually a very broken voice because for injuries sustained as a kid. But yeah, I'm glad that people think it's pretty interesting and sexy now. No one ever said that before I started my own podcast.
Well, you were probably getting bullied growing up, so now you're like, well, wait, that was not sexy then. What's going on?
Oh no, it's a childhood injury from inhaling smoke from being set on fire by mistake. Long story, but I can't talk about it yet.
Roman will be back on another stream. We'll talk about that later. Okay, I'm going to drop you off now, Roman. I'm going to close out my stream. I'll catch up with you a little bit later. Okay, thanks a lot, Roman. Thanks
Chris,
for being my guest. Really
appreciate it.
My pleasure. You take care.
Thank you, and thanks for everyone for watching. Much appreciated. Bye, everyone.
Cheers. All right, folks, that was Roman Cabanac from Morning Shot, my guest today on the Saturday live stream. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. So let me do a little quick housekeeping for folks to let you know. Tomorrow, I will be appearing on Loving Life, Scott Balson's channel based in South Africa, talking about Africa, and we'll also talk about South Africa. I know that some people are fans, some people don't like him. If you want to come watch it, you're welcome to. That will be at 8 p.m. in Gaborone and in Johannesburg tomorrow, Sunday, the 21st of June. And then next Friday, he'll be a special feature on my show at 11 Eastern, in the U.S., 5 p.m. in South Africa. Scott will be on my channel. So we'll do that next. Or no, I'm sorry. I'm mistaken. That might actually be at 8 o'clock as well. 8 o'clock as well. I'm sorry. Same time because he's in Australia at the time. So that'll also be at 8 o'clock in South Africa. So 2 o'clock here on the East Coast. So Sunday I'll be on his show, and then he'll be on my show next Friday. In addition, Major General Johan Just will be a guest on my program sometime soon. Big Daddy Liberty should be here soon. We're working that out right now. And I thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate the questions. I apologize we didn't get to all the questions today. We got to just a few of the comments and questions. So thank you for those. Appreciate it. Ramon and I got deep into the conversation, so it was difficult to keep up. But I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping once again, just thank some folks because there was a few things that took place. Got a few new members. Thank you so much for becoming members on the channel. And so I'd like to send out my thanks to the new members who joined. And now the members are up to 42, by the way. So John Jarvis and Herman Roos became members. Thank you so much for doing that. And then also for those who gave a super chat, I think I got a super chat, which came from Christoph Havange. It was a super sticker. So thank you so much, Christoph, for the super sticker there. Appreciate it. I wasn't doing e-begging on this show. It was really just to make sure that we talked about contemporary issues a little bit. Hopefully you learned a little bit more about Ramon. He's a fascinating guy. I really enjoy his program, and I hope you guys like it as well. All right, folks, let's see. Let me see if there's last closing comments I can address here very quickly. Scott from Loving Life is very racist, so I'll give that a miss, but you love Big Daddy Liberty. Well, see, you can't please everybody. Was changed for the cheapest cookie option from Starbucks. Oh, Christoph talking about the super chat. Well, thank you so much for the super sticker. Yeah, so I've got this one, not the full one. By the way, folks, for those who watch the show regularly, you may have noticed, or you didn't, got myself a new chair. The chair I was sitting on was killing my spine. I was starting to develop an elderly injury there. So I got myself a new gaming chair to sit on, so I'm more relaxed here. So anyway, all right. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening in Africa and your day in Australasia and here in the East Coast of the U.S. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Be safe and take care of yourselves, whether in the UK, in Australia, New Zealand. This has been the Saturday live stream on the Indaba Africa group, Chris Wyatt Africa channel. Thank you all so much. I don't know if I'll do a stream later today. I'll consider it. If I do, it certainly won't be a long one like last night with Joe Emilio when he was abusing my consumption of a Hefeweizen. He apparently had issues with that. Anyway, but please feel free to check out Roman's Morning Shot and the Renegade Report. I'll put the links in after the fact. And also you can also check out Herman Roos, his Farmer Travels channel, which is a new one, just getting started. As well as please go support Joe Emilio, who's currently fighting a legal battle against someone who slandered and libeled him online. And he's got a really good, interesting 3-minute video. I'll put a link to that as well after this in it so you can go check it out. And you can see his 3-minute video where he discusses what's going on in his case. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. Have a blessed day and weekend. And I'll catch you either later today or tomorrow, either for my live stream or for the Loving Life if you're able to show up.